In Atlanta, the racial wealth gap is staggering. White households hold 46 times more wealth than Black households. The Atlanta Land Trust is addressing this crisis by creating permanently affordable homes that help families build equity and stay rooted in their communities. By taking land out of the speculative market, ALT ensures long-term stability in neighborhoods threatened by rising prices and displacement. Learn more at atlantalandtrust.org. On this episode of Create the Village,
we kind of think of it as a pathway, and we are a stepping stone along that pathway, bridging a really important gap that exists for most people between being a renter and being a homeowner.
This is Create the Village, a podcast about the intersection of public policy and community development.
My name is 𝗔𝗱𝗏 I'm the CEO and founder of the Integral Group, a real estate company that focuses on creating value in cities and rebuilding the fabric of communities. You know, homeownership has long been held up as the cornerstone of the American dream, a pathway to stability, wealth building, and community investment. But for far too many, especially in the case of Black families, that path has been obstructed, twisted by decades of disinvestment, speculative pressure, and policies that prioritize profit over people. That's where Amanda Ryan and the Atlanta Land Trust step in. Amanda leads a visionary effort to redefine homeownership, not as a commodity to be flipped, but as a shared asset that builds equity and preserves community. Through the Community Land Trust model, Amanda and her team are making it possible for families who have shaped Atlanta to remain rooted in it. They are creating permanently affordable homes in neighborhoods where prices have otherwise pushed legacy residents out. In today's episode, Amanda and 𝗂𝗃 unpack the power of this model, not just as a housing strategy, but as a tool for justice. They explore how affordable homeownership can help close the racial wealth gap, stabilize communities, and create opportunity in a city that's rapidly changing. If we want cities that are truly inclusive and resilient, we need bold ideas and bold partnerships to get us there. So let's listen in after this message from our local sponsors.
Smart capital doesn't just chase returns, it builds them. The Ascent Project partners with mission-aligned investors to create resilient communities that work for both residents and capital. By embedding trusted, place-based programs into the fabric of housing developments, TAP improves tenant outcomes and supports long-term asset performance. Explore how this model can de-risk your next project. Visit theascentproject.org to explore partnership options.
𝗔𝗱𝗏, the African Diaspora Art Museum of Atlanta, is reimagining what it means to build with culture at the center. Through exhibitions, education, and community engagement, 𝗔𝗱𝗏 connects art to identity, belonging, and placemaking. As Atlanta grows, this museum is helping to ensure its soul grows with it. Explore the mission at 𝗂𝗏𝗏arts.org.
Today we are joined by Amanda Ryan, Executive Director of the Atlanta Land Trust, who is leading the charge on affordable homeownership as a tool for building wealth and stabilizing communities in Atlanta. Amanda's work focuses on ensuring that homeownership is accessible to Atlanta residents and that neighborhoods can retain their character in the face of real estate commoditization. Amanda, thank you for joining us. Welcome to Create the Village.
Thanks, 𝗂𝗃. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amanda, let's start with, there's this big question around homeownership being the cornerstone of building wealth in America. It's always been the case for many years. And the challenge has been the barriers that are faced with low-income families. Can you share with us how Atlanta Land Trust is working to break down these barriers?
Yeah, absolutely. First, let me just give a quick introduction to the Atlanta Land Trust. So we are a nonprofit organization who is focused on delivering and stewarding permanently affordable housing to support inclusive and equitable communities near the Atlanta Beltline and other targeted areas of the city. We operate as a community land trust, which is a unique type of nonprofit organization that works to remove land from the speculative real estate market and put it into community control for community benefit. We are, at this point, exclusively focused on homeownership. So we're really working to make sure that low and moderate income families in Atlanta have access to homeownership in order to help to increase their access to various communities, to economic mobility, to opportunity. So we do feel like homeownership is the cornerstone to wealth building and to a better life. And our lens at the Atlanta Land Trust is really focused on the fact that there is a huge racial wealth gap in the United States. Looking nationally, that wealth gap is 12.5 to 1. So white families in the United States have 12.5 times the assets of Black families in the United States. And in Atlanta, it is even worse. It is 46 to 1. So the reason for that huge gap is largely because Black families have been denied access to homeownership for generations and have not, as a result, had the ability to build assets. And so they're playing catch up.
So Amanda,
And we're really, yes, yeah, please.
if I may ask you, can you just to take a step back, can you, from where you see it, what does wealth building, what does that entail? So when you talk in terms of Black households, white households, can you frame what is meant by wealth building or creating wealth and the opportunities thereof?
Yeah, so wealth is your assets. And I think a lot of people think about wealth as those assets that you're able to pass down to your heirs, to the next generation. It's wealth that can last and to provide a foundation for people to have a better life. And the reason that wealth is important, and particularly wealth through home ownership, is because when you have an asset like a home, you can leverage that asset to build more wealth. So not only is homeownership important in that it provides you with stability and safety and some place to live, but when you have a home, that asset can be used for other things. It can be used to help pay for education. It can be used to start a business. Also, when you have an affordable monthly housing payment, you have other funds that you can use to make different types of investments. For example, we have homeowners that have been able to pursue advanced degrees because their home payment was affordable, so they could invest more money in their education. Or we have a homeowner who was able to quit their job and start a business of their own just because they had more income because the housing costs were more affordable.
Okay. So in what ways is Atlanta Land Trust stabilizing these neighborhoods and families to ensure that reduce the risk of displacement and gentrification?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really the key to everything that we're doing. And it is important to understand that we are stabilizing individual families as well as the broader community.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing that by pulling the land out of the speculative real estate market so it can't be purchased by investors or developers who are just going to bid up that value. We remove it from the speculative real estate market and then allow for the community to determine how that land is going to be used based on what their needs are. And the focus for us, again, is on providing access to affordable homeownership opportunities. So we let the community decide how that land is going to be used. And because it is no longer available for purchase, it helps to stabilize the investment activity that's happening within that specific community. And so prices aren't necessarily going to increase as quickly as they would otherwise if all of this land was available for purchase. For the homeowners themselves, it provides stability just in that they have a consistent and predictable monthly housing cost, and they have control over it if and when they move. The vast majority of our homeowners are renters. They've never owned a home before. And so they're used to a situation in which, they're renting a house or an apartment from a landlord who can increase their rent at any point without much notice and can kick them out when they're ready to divest themselves of their investment. So it puts the renter, the tenant, in a very precarious position. But when you own your home, you're the one who makes decisions about how long you stay there and when you're ready to move on.
So, Amanda, when you are buying this land to take it out of the marketplace, you are in a way competing, as you know, with corporate investors. As you know, Atlanta is one of those markets where we've seen corporate investors coming into the homeownership space,
right,
to buy land for rental purposes. How is the Atlanta Land Trust? Are you guys working through that to make sure that you are able to, which areas you're buying, and are you competing against these corporate investors as part of, supporting and facilitating affordable options for residents?
Well, fortunately for us, a lot of that corporate investment activity is taking place outside the city of Atlanta, kind of in the inner ring suburbs of the region. We operate exclusively within the city of Atlanta, and I think that is not as appealing as those corporate investors because of the fact that the housing stock within those areas is fairly unique. Some of it's old, some of it's in historic areas, and so it's a little bit more difficult to purchase, redevelop, and rent at scale. But we're definitely concerned about that because what we see happening is that these corporate investors what they're buying is what used to be entry-level housing stock for first-time home buyers. So what we're seeing is people no longer have that initial stepping stone of an affordable home that they once had access to in order to get into homeownership, because all of that inventory has been removed from the market by these corporate investors and rented out. So the effect that it's having is it is making homeownership even more inaccessible, largely for Black families in Atlanta suburbs. And I would say that the work that we're doing at the Atlanta Land Trust, on the other hand, is trying to increase access to homeownership for those exact families. The geographic area of focus is different, but that's the work that we're doing that kind of counters the work of those large corporate investors. But the scale is so different. The scale that we're operating at relative to the scale of those investors is just night and day. But we have seen that that some of those investors have been in conversation with some of our nonprofit peers about selling off portions of their portfolio for affordable homeownership.
If we just looking long term, Amanda, what would you hope Atlanta Land Trust will accomplish, let's say in the next 5 to 10 years, as it relates to your engagement and participation within the city of Atlanta, to give those entry-level residents and Atlantans an opportunity to own their own homes?
Well, I joined the Land Trust in 2018. And when I joined the Land Trust, we started a strategic planning process that takes us through the end of 2025. So I can tell you what our goal is through the end of 2025 is to have about 300 units in our portfolio with families living in them. And I would say we have line of sight into how we're going to get to 300. I don't know if we actually will have completed construction and moved people into 300 homes by that time. But it's an exciting point because we're really wrapping up that initial strategic plan that was designed to operationalize the organization. And we're now at a point where we can kind of dream bigger. We know a lot more about how to do this work. We have better relationships with funders, with development partners, with home builders. We better understand the needs of home buyers. And so we're going to go through another strategic planning process in 2025 that will cast our vision for the next 5 years. And what I suspect is, yes, within that plan, we will identify some number of units that we're hoping to achieve. But I think that our impact more broadly will be that there is an awareness and an acceptance of this shared ownership model, this community ownership model, and that there'll be more willingness among many stakeholders to partner with us to do the work. So those partners can be public sector partners who have been very supportive of us, but have a lot more policy levers that they can pull in order to increase the number of homes that are being placed into a community land trust. Those can be funders who now understand how we work and have seen our ability to execute, but also home building partners or development partners who maybe are developing within the city of Atlanta market rate housing and have the ability to set aside a portion of those units for affordable housing. So we're creating more mixed income communities in areas of opportunity throughout the city of Atlanta.
So Amanda, let me go back one step to the earlier question around your target of 300 homes by next year. And what's the profile of your buyers? Who are you guys really setting out to attract? Are these millennials? Are these Gen Zs?
I would say it's a pretty broad age range, but the demographic profile of our buyer is largely a single Black female. Some who have families and some who are just living by themselves. And we're primarily serving buyers with incomes at or below 80% of the area median, which is today roughly $60,000.
Okay. And in terms of your partnerships, you were talking about even partnering with real estate developers. How is that working for you guys? What are you guys doing to make sure you can be the right partner for them? Instead of other opportunities that they could be, they may want to go in, that may actually give them more, more upsides or economics. I know out there in the world, developers are known to be greedy bastards, right? So what are you guys doing?
Right. Well, I have to say, a lot of those partnerships come to us as a result of mandates that are placed on the developers. So there are very few developers that are coming to us out of the goodness of their own hearts, wanting to partner and provide affordable housing. But I understand being in that position and needing to make a project work financially. So what ends up happening, Etta, is that Invest Atlanta or the city of Atlanta will place a requirement on a developer that they set aside a certain percentage of the homes that they're building for affordable housing. And in exchange for that, they get some sort of public financing, or it may be a zoning requirement that they are having to adhere to. So many come to the table because there's a policy requirement that is forcing them to do so. But for us, that's great. It's great to have public partners who see value in this model and want to encourage developers to partner with us. So that's been great. There are a couple of partners that we work with who just have kind of a more mission-driven approach where they want to create mixed income communities that do include affordability. And we really value those relationships as well. So I would love to do more of that. We have several of those partnerships that are in place or in negotiation right now. So I think over the next couple of years, we'll see those play out, and hopefully that will attract then other developers to want to do the same. Because to some extent, this is still kind of an untested situation. And the more that we're able to evidence our ability to execute on these partnerships, I think the more interest there will be in working with us.
What do you mean by it's untested?
Well, I don't think our model is untested. I think determining exactly how we implement partnerships with private developers. We know how to do it conceptually. We've done it a few times, but the more that we're able to do it, to show exactly, this is the timeline, this is what the legal structure is going to look like, this is what the compensation structure is going to look like, the more that we can formalize that, I think and the more predictability that we can bring to that, the more folks will be willing to work with us.
Understood. Just to get a little specific on what you're doing, are there specific or particular programs that you're currently leading that you think is going to move the needle or get the scale that you will want? I know you have a goal for 300 homes. Probably in the next 5 years, you probably want to double or triple that. What programs do you think can get you on that path so that we can actually start to move the needle of not just preserving, but creating affordable homes for Atlantans?
So up to this point, we've really only had one program, one primary program, and that is just the plain vanilla community land trust model. And that has been intentional because we really wanted to prove how this model works and how it can be successful and impactful before we start to iterate on that model. But again, we're at a point of in time now where we are wrapping up our strategic plan and looking to a new strategic planning process that will set our course for the future. And we have several new programs that will be evaluated as part of that planning process. One program is what's called a buyer-driven program, where we essentially give a home buyer a set amount of money to buy a house anywhere in the city, not an Atlanta Land Trust developed home, but any home that's available on the private real estate market. They can buy that house and we will give them a set amount of money in order to make that home affordable. And in exchange for that, they will put the land underneath that home into the Atlanta Land Trust, bringing it into our program and ensuring the long-term affordability of that home. That's a program that the Houston Community Land Trust has seen a lot of success with. And that's a program that can scale if you have the money, because we're not having to build the homes. That's what takes time. Taking a project through the development process, through the construction process, securing the financing for that project, that's what takes time. So if we are able to secure the financial resources, we would like to do a buyer-driven program. We're also looking at a program that would help longtime homeowners stay in their homes when faced with kind of significant repair investments that need to be made. And we're also looking at creating a program where we would support other nonprofit organizations in implementing their own community land trusts. So we essentially could provide consulting services or management services to another nonprofit that has created their own community land trust, but doesn't want to make the investment or build the capacity to do it on their own.
So you mentioned Houston Land Trust, across the country, which are there specific models or that you will say is best of breeds that your team are also evaluating to do here in Atlanta?
Yeah, so the community land trust model has been around in the United States since 1969. The first community land trust was created in Southwest Georgia as part of the civil rights movement. It was called New Communities, Inc. And they existed to provide Black farmers with ownership of the land that they were farming. Since then, the movement has spread throughout the United States, and there are over 300 community land trust programs across the country. So we're really fortunate in that we're kind of late to the game. And so we have a lot of peers that we can look to that have been at this work for decades and have learned a lot of lessons and are incredibly generous with their time and resources. And we've been able to learn from them. So the Houston Community Land Trust is actually similar in age to us, but I certainly would consider them a peer that we look to for their best practices. And there are a lot of unique approaches to this work across the country that are responsive to what the needs are in each of those markets. When I started the Land Trust in 2018, I went to go visit the Athens Community Land Trust, which has been around for quite some time as well, and was able to learn a lot from them. But they also do a lot of agricultural work there, which we don't do in Atlanta. And they have a more of a diversity of programs that they offer, but still face a lot of the same challenges that we do. And so because they're in the same state as us, they are in a similar political environment. And so we found their insight and their guidance to be really valuable as well.
So if you were to, how are you measuring success? What are the indicators, markers that you're using to say, yes, we are moving in the right direction. Stars are aligning for Atlanta Land Trust to scale and to also get other partners involved, so we can continue to address this housing affordability crisis, which is more so important on the ownership side as well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Even as we focus so much on the rental world of housing.
So the most basic measure that we're using right now to determine our success is simply the number of homes that we have with homeowners living in them. Because our program is so young, that's the best measure that we have. But ultimately, over time, what we're going to seek to measure is how our homeowners' lives are changing because of their ability to own an affordable home, and ultimately how much wealth they're able to build through this homeownership opportunity. Looking at national data, what we see is that community land trust homeowners stay in their homes about 6 years, and then 63% will go on to purchase a market rate home when they sell their community land trust home. So that metric is also really insightful and important because it tells us whether or not we are creating a pathway for our homeowners to traditional homeownership, wherein they have the ability to build more wealth. So we kind of think of it as a pathway, and we are a stepping stone along that pathway, bridging a really important gap that exists for most people between being a renter and being a homeowner. And so a lot of our impact, we're not going to be able to see for a couple of years still, but we're collecting all of the data. We're collecting all the baseline data so that we're going to be able to, in a couple of years, look and see how our homeowners' lives have been affected by this program.
Amanda, it feels to me, is it accurate for me to say, it feels like a scaffolding story, right? Where you sort of, you guys are acting as a scaffolding to get folks into the, homeownership world where they actually have assets that we allow them create wealth, but with some restrictions, meaning, there's guidelines they have to follow. But they are able to graduate into the unrestricted world if they choose.
Right.
It sounds like that's what you just described.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. Really creating a foundation for people to, again, have a better life, whatever that looks like. The stability of homeownership, the wealth building opportunity, so that they are better positioned to realize whatever their dreams are, whether that includes traditional homeownership or not. And really also being mindful about the communities that we're putting people in and trying to make sure that we're placing people in neighborhoods that have access to opportunity. The number one consideration for us when thinking about where we are working and what neighborhoods we're focused in really is access to the Beltline or MARTA.
Mm-hmm.
And then being in a community that has access to various amenities, whether that's healthcare, a grocery store, a bank.
Right. Yeah, here at Integral, we'll say quality of life infrastructure,
Yeah. And honestly, a lot of the neighborhoods we're working in are changing so fast. And to some extent, that's what we're trying to curb, because we're really in communities where there has been significant public investment made, whether that's the Beltline or other public infrastructure projects like the West Side Park. We want to make sure that as those public investments are made with public dollars paid by taxpayers, that those same taxpayers have the ability to remain in those communities or to live in those communities and benefit from the public infrastructure that their money is essentially funding. And so that's really of paramount importance to us, that we're giving and we're creating and preserving the ability to live in these neighborhoods that are experiencing rapid gentrification resulting from those public investments, and make sure that we are helping to mitigate displacement and preserve affordability.
That's a big topic now. As I would say, the numbers is not enough to tell the story. Can you, in fact, share some specific families or neighborhoods that have been impacted by what Atlanta Land Trust, you and your team are currently doing in the city of Atlanta?
Yeah, so I shared one of these stories earlier, a piece of one of these stories, but I like to talk about one of our homeowners named 𝗔𝗱𝗏. She purchased a home from the Atlanta Land Trust in 2019 in the Pittsburgh neighborhood. And she tells her story around how much she wanted to live in the city of Atlanta. And she thought, if I can just find an apartment in the city of Atlanta, maybe then I can find a home. So she thought, being proximate was really important. So she moved into an apartment off Pryor Road with her kids and couldn't even let them play outside because there was so much criminal activity in and around the apartment community. She was commuting to Buckhead for the job that she had at a daycare center on MARTA. She found the Atlanta Land Trust. She ended up buying her home. And because of the Atlanta Land Trust, her mortgage ended up being less expensive than the rent that she was paying in a really poor quality apartment. She was then able to quit her job and start a business. Her business is called The Happy Black Parent. It's in the Pittsburgh neighborhood where she can ride her bike. And she also has joined the board of directors of the Atlanta Land Trust. And so that's kind of a key differentiator of our model at ALT, is that we have community members and homeowners represented on our board, informing all of our decision making. So it's really been incredibly insightful to have 𝗔𝗱𝗏 on our board talking about her experience moving through the home buying process at the Atlanta Land Trust and what kind of support she needs now as a homeowner, and how we can best support our homeowners to ensure their success.
That's a very great story. Can you share what discount, just a very high level, what discount relative to rents was that? Was that 10%, 5%?
Yeah, it was about 10%. Mm-hmm.
Okay, fantastic. We, as Atlanta continues to grow, we know this is what we talked about every time. As the city continues to grow, like most other big cities, housing affordability continues to be a challenge. So what you and your team are doing at ALT is impressive. We need more of that in order to address to stem the issue of housing affordability crisis, and also allow us to have a more resilient city. Amanda, can you share what unique challenges that your team at ALT are facing, as you described earlier on the disparity between Black homeownership rates versus white ownership rates? Are there any unique challenges that you want to share in terms of what you guys are having to deal with?
Our biggest challenge is probably just fundraising. The biggest challenge that our home buyers face is just in the overall affordability of the home. It's not necessarily credit challenges or too much debt or things like that. It's really, they just have a limited amount of income, and we need to make our homes affordable to that income level, which means that we need to raise more subsidy in order to sell our homes for lower prices. And that is always the tension that we face. Incomes theoretically go up every year based on the area median income, and that's typically what we tie our sales prices to. But the reality on the ground is people's incomes are not actually going up every year, at least the folks that we're working with. And so we need to continue to stay attuned to the reality and the financial challenges that our home buyers are facing, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to secure the resources to keep our sales prices as low as possible so that they are accessible and affordable to as many people as possible. And then just doing that at scale. So there are a lot of challenges we face, but I think the biggest thing that we'll always have to do is just fundraise in order to subsidize the sales prices of our homes.
So meaning that you also want to expand the partnerships that you have during fundraising. Is that what that looks like?
Yeah, partnerships are incredibly important to us in everything that we're doing. And we recognize that we're not suited to be a home builder, and we're not suited to do a number of different things. And it doesn't make sense for us to build the capacity to do a number of things when there are already people out there who are doing them successfully. So partnerships have been a key component of our success up to this point. Partnerships with developers, partnerships with home builders, with general contractors, with funders, with other nonprofits, with Invest Atlanta, with the city. So, as the mayor says, Atlanta is a group project, and every single house that we build is a group project in the truest sense. So expanding the pool of partners that we work with would also be really powerful to have a bigger tent of people that are working to support our mission. That certainly would be welcome, and I think will be an important part of us being able to scale as an organization.
So just on a last note, real estate is local. We all know that. And as you focus on the Atlanta market, you would anticipate other organizations to join, in championing this effort around increasing the supply of affordable housing options. So from you've been at ALT now, Amanda, for how many years? 7 years?
6 years.
6 years. 6 years. Thank you. So what are the lessons, if you may, that you will want to share with other folks who wants to come in this space to increase, to scale up, like you mentioned, we need other folks to join in. What are those lessons that you want to share? What are the pitfalls, the tricks that you've also learned, as well as what's working, what's not working, that you probably want to share with other folks that are interested?
Well, I find this work in Atlanta to be incredibly collaborative, which is great. I mentioned we have all these partners, but we have a lot of peers that are doing similar work, but it really is along a spectrum. People need different types of housing at different points of their lives. It's important that we have providers that are working across the spectrum to meet the various needs that exist at different points in time for different communities, for people at different ages, et cetera. And so it's really been wonderful to do this very challenging work in collaboration with a community of people who are really talented, committed, passionate about this. And so that, I think, is working really well in Atlanta. It doesn't feel competitive at all. It feels like incredibly supportive. And I think because of that, over the past 6 years since I've been at the Land Trust, we have seen a lot of movement in this space in Atlanta. And there's certainly a recognition of the need for affordable housing and the importance of housing affordability for us as a city and a region. But there's also consensus around solutions, and there are resources that now exist that never existed before. And there are organizations like House ATL that are bringing people together in order to effectively collaborate on the implementation and identification of solutions. So it's been really heartening to be able to do this work in community with others at this moment in Atlanta. But then on the other hand, we are not producing enough housing to accommodate all of the people that are moving here today or that will be moving here in the future. So it really is kind of an uphill battle that we're facing. And at the Atlanta Land Trust, I think our solution is uniquely positioned to provide a more sustainable solution than we have employed in the past. But the challenge will continue to grow regardless, because Atlanta is the 6th fastest growing region in the United States. We're going to gain 2 million people by 2050. And all these people coming to Atlanta are going to put more and more pressure on housing costs. So we need to recognize that and accelerate all of the work that we're doing. And people that are not in the affordable housing space, but maybe in real estate, need to support that work, because our health as a region and our ability to function and to serve as the economic powerhouse that we are in the state is really dependent on our ability to be able to house people here, to work those jobs and maintain a good quality of life for them as well. And so we all need to be focused on this. We all need to be working together to solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also an economic competitive story, right? If we must,
absolutely.
Right now we're the 5th largest growing metro in America, but if we must be competitive in the next 10, 20 years, we absolutely need to make sure we're intentional about solving this. Amanda, thank you for sharing your perspective on affordable homeownership and community stabilization with us. Your work with ALT brings homeownership within reach for more Atlanta families, making a real difference and impact in the stability and future of our local communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ade. It was a pleasure.
Ade, that conversation with Amanda, very deep, interesting, a number of perspectives that I must say, while you know them on the surface, cause me to think a little deeper. And obviously, far too often, we speak of homeownership as the gateway to generational wealth. And in some respects, it can be. But Amanda stripped away that abstraction, because nobody really knows what gateway to generational wealth means. She removed that abstraction and brought it to life.
Absolutely. What struck me was how Amanda connected something as big as generational wealth to the daily decisions that families all across the countries are making every day. In fact, even right now, more so, she wasn't talking in slogans. She was talking strictly about the structure and the daily agonies of the average family in the United States.
Yeah, yes, and in fact, she brought precision to the discussion. It was grounded in policy, structure, and probably most important of all, the lived experiences of real people. Because as you just said, these are struggles that individuals and families are experiencing every day. And so there is a personal sense to it or side to it that often escapes that record.
Absolutely. Totally, absolutely. She emphasized ownership models, affordability formulas, constraints, public trust, and at the soul of it, talked about how families are trying to stay rooted in communities they helped build. She's basically saying there should be zero tolerance to displacement of any sort.
That's true. And we all at one level feel that, even though sometimes we know displacement is something that cannot be totally avoided, but at a minimum should be minimized as much as possible. So let me ask you, what resonated most with you from that exchange, the exchange you had with Amanda, and what moments really cut through and stayed with you?
Really, the emphasis on just focused on ownership and how that is a path to wealth generation for families stuck with me the most. And I do think that's a big part of wealth and income mobility for most families in the country.
So now you and I are both in the real estate business, obviously. And one of the things that we know is, first, you've got to get site control. And site control can sometimes be subjected to wide swings in people's view of what their land is worth. And depending on the timing in the economic cycle, the state of the neighborhood transformation effort, and so on, there's a tremendous amount of swing that can happen in how land values are assessed. And so Amanda said something that's still echoing with me. And she talked about removing land from the speculative market as something that is core to the work that she's doing. She's removing land from the speculative market and trying to put a very clear, finite value on it that doesn't change over time.
Absolutely. That stuck with me too as well. And I have to commend Amanda for the work she's doing. She's really doing, practicing what she preached. It's a very deep angle to the concept of land as a big part of what we do when we build communities. And she sort of reframes land as a public good, not just a commodity. And that's the biggest hurdle. How do you look at land as a public good so that you can use it to incentivize people and mitigate the displacement we just talked about?
Yeah, and her words were not, to me at least, were not just a clever phrase. I mean, removing land from the speculative market sounds catchy, but for her it wasn't just a clever phrase. She was really talking about it in the way of a radical reframing. It is, let's confront the deeply entrenched idea that housing exists to be bought, flipped, and profited from, rather than to be lived in with dignity. Because the more the land values are allowed to fly all over the board, the more it becomes a speculator's game and not something where people are making a decision about where they're going to live with and raise their family. And so that was what, to me, was the reframing she was trying to do.
And honestly, it's a political will, right? There's still this deeply ingrained belief, especially in hard markets and when markets are upward, on the upward trend, that the progress should be defined by price escalation, meaning that we want to take advantage of a good market. And it's good to recognize that we are in a capitalist system, which is fine, but there is still the importance and significance of using land to ensure that folks that have access to increase the path for homeownership to folks is very important, and that will involve some political will. Which, as we know, could be difficult, especially in election years.
Okay, and we're in Atlanta. And obviously in Atlanta, speculation has long since begun to outpace solutions. So we all are looking for decent, affordable, or attainable housing. But speculation has been causing, through various mechanisms, the bidding up of the value or price, at least, of housing, with land being an important part of that value equation. So what are the biggest obstacles that you see to expand in that model? That is the model that Amanda is promoting.
Yeah, it's got to be, and I think what Amanda is saying is right on point. But until we make the shift in mindset and reorient public incentives in such a way that allows us, even starting with the land, as she rightly puts it, in such a way that we can use it to scale this model that encourages homeownership and prioritizes permanence of people in an affordable way over profit, we will continue to struggle. And the obstacles, as you rightly pointed out, EP, is that if we don't find a way to, put a public incentive, use land as a public incentive to mitigate that price escalation, most of the areas where people with choices wants to live will be out of reach for a lot of people, And as we know, the business of housing is a quality of life issue.
Mm-hmm.
So this is it's important, and that's why we have an affordability crisis, not just only in Atlanta, but even across the country.
Yeah, and to that point, obviously, one of the compelling arguments promoted is that land trusts don't thrive on just capital. It's more to it than capital. They need, in fact, they demand, I would say, collaboration. They need real alignment. You need alignment among developers, nonprofits, policymakers, and not all working in silos, but moving together with shared purpose, because capital needs to be patient. Developers need to be operating with capital that is patient and may in fact not be looking at profit maximization as the measure of success, but some other metrics as well, with profit being one of them, right?
That's correct. That is totally correct. And I think we have gotten better at collaboration when you look at the housing ecosystem, especially here in Atlanta. In the last, I'll say 8 to 10 years, there has been tremendous improvement. But what Amanda was calling for is something deeper. She's basically saying that there's got to be a clear line of sight to shared risk and shared accountability. And that's a much higher bar.
But if I listen to you and what you said that you're seeing, is it safe to say that you already see those partnerships shifting? In other words, are we getting closer to true cooperation, or just better at talking about it?
Yeah, we are. I know, just to talk about it, just in Atlanta alone, there have been different parties and stakeholders coming to the table to combine resources, whether between the housing agencies and the cities. So it's moving. The potential is there, is real. I'm seeing more of that, cross-sector pilots that is taking place, where the partners are co-creating their systems and their processes in such a way that can produce scale, to help developers and not just checking the box at the end of the day. That's the shift that we need, so that alignment is not just in purpose, but it's actually in practice. And I think we're gradually, I would say in Atlanta, we're gradually getting there.
Yes, and in fact, I would say, just based on the work that we've been doing for 3 decades plus, housing, whether it's affordable or market or anything in between, and whatever you want to call it, cannot exist in isolation. It has to be connected. It has to be connected to jobs, maybe to transit, to schools, etc. Otherwise, it's just another box with a roof. And so that's why we coined the term quality of life infrastructure to force people to think about all those other things that if you're raising a family and you need to shop, you need parks, you need a decent school, you need early childhood development, you need employment around you need all these other things. That quality of life infrastructure is what determines whether that box is well situated to be attractive for you to want to be there.
That's correct. Yep. Amanda, it sort of felt like listening to Amanda seems like, did she get a peek at the integral book of community development? And I'm saying this jokingly. But she did reminded me that housing can be an island. And to your point, it cannot be disconnected to your place of work. It can be disconnected from transportation. It cannot be disconnected to the child care where you have to put your children. It cannot be disconnected from not just schools, but good schools. And it's sort of re-emphasizing our philosophy here at Integral that we are not in the business of housing development, but the lens through which we have to solve it is one of community development.
Well said. And simply said, it is not only about the price tag of a house, it's about the ecosystem that surrounds that house that helps to make it a home.
Absolutely. It was something that came through from Amanda's message, and it tells me we are onto something here. And I'm saying we are onto something. We've been doing this. Integral has been this business of community development for 32 years. I know we try to call ourselves a 32-year-old startup so that we can continue to innovate, and there's many more improvements that can be made. But our core mission is seeping into the larger industry, and I hope my hope will be that other developers take this as more of a community development solution and not just a one housing unit at a time, but more in terms of what we refer to as impacting the quality of life infrastructure.
So with that said, then, does that mean, did anything Amanda shared with us push you to rethink how developers approach site selection? And did it reframe what success should look like on the ground?
It does. And I think that's the work she's doing at the Atlanta Land Trust is to make sure that we see land as a public good to encourage support community development, thereby increasing the mobility of families, and in the process allowing them to generate wealth, not just for themselves, but for the generations coming behind them.
Yes, and at first I was struck by her long view. But then she has no choice but to have a long view, because in perpetuity is a long time. So she's not chasing unit counts or short-term wins. She's focused on what really matters, which is building wealth, preserving dignity, and creating lasting stability and affordability for families over generations. So she has absolutely no choice but to have and take a long view with the work she's doing.
That's exactly its impact, not for today, but for generations to come. And that's what sustainability means, right?
Yes. And I would say if you're truly committed to closing the racial wealth gap, then we have to stop treating homeownership as the finish line. It may be more like the starting line than the finish line, right?
Too often, people treat homeownership like it's the prize at the end of the race. But what Amanda made clear is that the platform from which everything else grows. That's what homeownership is. It is the foundation, the stability of families, the dignity to every individual and human being, the mobility, the fact that you can start from here and you can get there, and looking at it that way makes it, a means to an end, and not the end by itself, and she did a good job at re-emphasizing that.
Yeah, I like the idea of it not being, I said a starting point, but it's not really a starting point. It is a foundation, not the finale. It's really what you're building the possibility of generational wealth on. It's one of those things that you can do that. And that's the kind of bold, grounded innovation our cities desperately need. That is solutions that are rooted in equity, not just efficiency. So Ade, thank you very much for guiding that conversation with such thoughtfulness, with a very thoughtful party on the other side in Amanda. Deep gratitude to Amanda for being willing to do that and for the work she's doing and for bringing such rare clarity to an issue that affects all of us.
Next time on Create the Village.
How can we bring that type of investment and amenity to the neighborhood so that people can stay within their social networks and thrive?
Create the Village is produced by Felicia Ann Rosennuha and Chantrell Brewer. Executive producer Rick White. It's edited by Brennan Robinson. Create the Village is a production of the Integral Group LLC, copyright 2025.